The silence in my parents' dining room is a palpable thing. You could cut it with the knife that's sitting, untouched, next to the roast chicken. It's my favorite the way mom makes it, but tonight it just sits there, a golden brown monument to our family's complete and utter implosion. This Sunday dinner used to be the anchor of my week. Now it feels like a courtroom, and I'm the one on trial. Ryan's chair is empty. It's been empty for 4 Sundays in a row, and its emptiness is louder than any argument we've ever had. I try to fill the void. I clear my throat and start telling a mildly funny story from my paralegal job, something about a deposition gone wrong. The story just dies. It crashes and burns halfway across the oak table. My dad just sighs, this heavy, tired sound that feels like a lead weight in my stomach. My mom, who usually hangs on my every word, suddenly finds the floral pattern on her plate the most fascinating thing in the world. It was just a joke, I want to scream. Why is everyone acting like I committed a federal crime? But the words don't come out. How did we get here? How did a stupid running gag, our little family inside joke, turn into this gaping wound? I look at his empty chair, at the untouched plate my mom still sets for him out of habit, and the question just echoes in the suffocating quiet. I know what I did. I just can't, for the life of me, understand how it ended up breaking everything. To understand how I could be so monumentally stupid, you have to understand my family. My parents, especially my dad, are products of a generation that measures love in achievements. They're not bad people. They just have a very narrow, very specific definition of success, and it's spelled MONEY, reflected in promotions and respectable job titles. Their approval has always been the ultimate prize in our household, a currency I learned to value more than sibling affection, more than basic decency, apparently. And for most of my life, I was the rich one. I was the good daughter. I went to a decent college, landed a paralegal position in a respectable downtown law firm, and I was on track. My life was a neat little checklist, and I was ticking all the boxes they cared about. I was predictable, I was safe. I was a success story they could tell their friends at the country club. Ryan was different. He was the artist, the dreamer, the one who inherited my mom's gentle hands and my grandfather's chaotic, brilliant creative spirit. He didn't see the world in spreadsheets and 5-year plans. His passion was food, not just eating it but creating it. He could talk for hours about the Maillard reaction or the perfect crumb structure of a sourdough loaf, his eyes lighting up in a way mine never did when I talked about drafting legal documents. A few years ago, against my dad's very vocal advice, he poured every cent he had and a little he didn't into his dream, a gourmet food truck called the Rolling Scone. It was his entire world on 4 wheels, painted a cheerful blue, a beacon of everything he stood for. And it was a spectacular, soul-crushing failure. He was maybe a little too ambitious with his menu, a little too naive about the brutal realities of the food industry, the permits, the competition. He ran out of capital in 6 months. The truck, his beautiful, vibrant dream, was repossessed. The debt lingered, a quiet, shameful cloud over his head. It was a crushing blow, a humiliation that he felt deep in his bones, one that I saw change him. For him, it was the lowest point of his life. For me, I'm ashamed to admit it became an opportunity. In the zero-sum game of my parents' affection, his failure was my win. It became the easiest, most reliable way to make my father laugh, to get that approving nod, and to secure my position as the golden child. It became my material. It didn't start as a conscious act of cruelty. At least that's the lie I tell myself. It was more insidious, a slow poison I introduced into our family's bloodstream. The first time, it was almost an accident. We were all at Sunday dinner a few months after the food truck disaster. Ryan was quiet, withdrawn, a ghost at the table. My dad, in his usual blunt way, was grilling him about his new, less than glamorous job as a line cook. Is this what you're going to do forever? Fry things for other people's success? The tension was thick enough to choke on. Trying to be the hero to break the awful silence, I quipped, "Hey, at least the kitchen you're in now can't get a flat tire, right?" The reaction was immediate and intoxicating. My dad, who had been scowling into his plate, let out a short, sharp bark of a laugh. It was a rare sound, that genuine amusement, and it felt like sunshine breaking through clouds. My mom shot me a look, a familiar cocktail of disapproval and amusement, and said, "Jessica, be nice." But there was no force behind it. It was a performance of maternal duty, not a real command to stop. It was a green light. I had found the magic button. In that moment, I wasn't just Jessica, the dutiful paralegal. I was Jessica, the witty daughter who could manage Dad's moods. It felt good. It felt like winning. That feeling was a drug, and I was a desperate addict. The pressure in our family, the constant, unspoken competition, was immense. My job was stable, but I was drowning in a sea of overachieving lawyers, constantly feeling one misstep away from being seen as merely adequate. I brought that gnawing anxiety home with me. Making that joke and getting that laugh was a release valve. As long as the spotlight of failure was pointed at Ryan, it couldn't be on me. So I did it again and again. The jokes became a staple of our family gatherings, my own sick stand-up routine. Hey Ryan, pass the salt. Just don't bankrupt the salt shaker, I'd say, glancing at Dad for the expected chuckle. Wow, this casserole is amazing, Mom. Ryan, you should get the recipe. It's a guaranteed success, unlike, each time it worked. Each time I got the validation I craved. I saw the flicker of pain in Ryan's eyes, the way his shoulders would slump just a little. But I told myself it was for the greater good of the family dynamic. I was the court jester, and his greatest failure was my best material. I framed it in my head as a lesson in resilience. I was just helping him toughen up, learn to laugh at himself. Because the alternative, that I was just being a cruel, insecure bully to my own brother for a pat on the head, was too ugly to even consider. I wasn't completely blind, I was willfully ignorant. I saw the change in him, but I chose to misinterpret every single signal. It was a gradual erosion. At first, when I'd make a crack about the food truck, he'd offer a tight, forced smile, a grimace that barely passed for good humor. Then it became a stony silence, his jaw clenching for just a second before he'd deliberately change the subject to something blandly safe, like the weather. In the last year, it got much worse. I'd launch one of my jokes, my little performance piece for our parents, and he would just physically check out. He wouldn't even look at me. He'd just put his fork down, his gaze drifting to the dark window, his entire posture screaming, I am not here. His presence at the table became a technicality. His spirit had already fled the room. The signs were all there like bright red, flashing warning lights on a sinking ship. He stopped calling me to share little things, a new band he discovered, a funny movie he'd watched, the small, meaningless connections that form the real fabric of a sibling relationship. Our text conversations became purely logistical, sterile exchanges about Mom's birthday or who was bringing what for Christmas. He started finding excuses to leave family dinners early. A friend needed help, he had an early shift, he wasn't feeling well. The excuses became more frequent, less plausible. I noticed it all, I'm a paralegal. My job is to notice details, to see patterns. I just built a different story around them, a narrative that cast me as the concerned, slightly exasperated older sister and him as the troubled artist who couldn't get his act together. He's just so sensitive, I'd complain to my mom in private, a calculated performance of sympathy. He needs to get over it, it's been years. Life is tough. I painted him as someone trapped in the past, unable to move on from his failure. It was so much easier to see him as weak than to see myself as cruel. It protected my role as the successful one, the one who had it all figured out. My jokes weren't the problem, his inability to take a joke was. Looking back, it's so nauseatingly clear. He wasn't just withdrawing from the memory of his failure, he was withdrawing from me. Every time I brought it up, I wasn't just reminding him of the truck. I was reminding him that his own sister, the person who should have been his staunchest defender, would gladly use his deepest pain as a punchline for a cheap laugh. The last dinner, the one that blew everything up, started so well it felt like a scene from a different family's life. It was the best we'd been in years. Ryan arrived with a bottle of expensive wine and a genuine, unforced smile that reached his eyes. He was practically vibrating with good energy, a frequency I hadn't felt from him in ages. He talked, he laughed, he asked about my work. It was normal, it was easy. Halfway through the meal, after my mom had served the main course, he cleared his throat, looking nervous but incredibly proud. He announced that the head chef at the upscale restaurant where he'd been working for 2 years, grinding away, paying his dues, had just given his notice. The owners had offered him the job. Not a line cook, not a sous chef, the executive chef. It was a huge, life-changing deal. It was everything he'd been working towards since the truck. It was validation on his own terms. He was back. My mom teared up, her hand flying to her chest. My dad, who usually treats praise like it's a finite resource, looked at him with something that resembled pure, unadulterated pride. Well, damn, son, he said, raising his wine glass in a toast. That's fantastic news. Knew you had it in you. The atmosphere in the room was warm, celebratory, golden. It was a perfect family moment, the kind you see in commercials. And I just couldn't stand it. I had to ruin it. I don't know what it was. A flash of bitter jealousy that his passion was finally paying off while I was still just a cog in a machine. The primal fear of losing my hard-won position as the family's #1 success story. Or maybe just the stupid, ugly habit of it, the deep, worn-out groove of my cruelty. As everyone was clinking glasses and congratulating him, as he was basking in that rare, beautiful moment of validation, I opened my mouth. The words came out before I could even think, slick with poison. Wow, executive chef, that's amazing, Rye, I said, my voice dripping with a fake sweetness that felt sour in my own mouth. I leaned forward, making sure I had everyone's attention for my big punchline. At least you know this kitchen won't get wheels and drive off a cliff, right? The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't just quiet, it was a vacuum that sucked all the air, all the joy, all the warmth out of the room. It was the sound of a load-bearing wall turning to dust. It was the sound of something shattering forever. Ryan didn't get angry, he didn't yell, he just looked at me, and the look in his eyes, it wasn't hurt, not anymore. It was something much, much worse. It was a calm, devastating finality. It was the look you give something that is already dead and gone. He slowly, deliberately placed his knife and fork down on his plate, the soft clinking sound echoing like a gunshot in the dead air. He folded his napkin and placed it beside his plate, then he looked at my parents, completely ignoring me. I'm done, he said, his voice quiet but perfectly clear, cutting through the silence. He pushed his chair back, stood up, and walked out of the dining room without another word, without a single look back. And I knew in that horrifying, silent moment that he didn't just mean he was done with dinner. Ryan walking out that door was like flipping a switch on the entire family. The system, which had always hummed along with me at its center, just shut down. I immediately grabbed my phone and sent him a frantic text. I'm so sorry, Rye, it was a stupid joke, I didn't mean it. The little bubble with 3 dots appeared for a second, then vanished. No reply. I tried calling. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. His voice, cheerful and recorded months ago, felt like a ghost mocking me. The real shock came a week later. My mom called me, her voice strained. Jessica, she started, and I could already hear the exhaustion. I just got off the phone with your brother. I held my breath, expecting her to tell me to go over there and apologize again. Instead, she said, he told us he won't be coming to Sunday dinners anymore, not if you're there. I was stunned. What? But that's not fair. The words tumbled out of me, a reflex of indignation. And then came the blow that knocked the wind out of me. We agreed, Jessica, she said, her voice flat. He's right, what you did, it was too much. You need to fix this, but we're not going to force him to sit there and be your punching bag anymore. That was the beginning of the freeze out. It was a systematic isolation, so quiet and efficient it was terrifying. The family group chat, once filled with daily chatter, fell silent. If I posted something, it would be met with nothing. Then I found out through a cousin's Instagram story about a family barbecue I hadn't been invited to. There was Ryan at the grill, surrounded by everyone, laughing. I wasn't just uninvited, I was erased. My key to my parents' house still worked, but the home itself felt locked. I had spent years curating my role in this family, using my brother's pain as the price of admission. And in one night, they had simply, quietly, and unanimously decided the cost was too high. They had chosen him. The full crushing weight of what I had done didn't truly hit me until my cousin's wedding 2 months later. It was a mandatory family event, the first one I couldn't be excluded from. I saw Ryan across the reception hall. He looked good. He was standing with a group of our cousins, holding a glass of champagne, and he was laughing, a real deep laugh that made his shoulders shake. For a horrifying second, I thought I could fix it. I thought I could walk over there, armed with the perfect, heartfelt apology I had been rehearsing for weeks, and bridge the chasm I had created. I took a step forward and he happened to look up. Our eyes met. There was no anger, no hatred. There was just nothing. A polite, distant recognition you'd give a stranger. He gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod, then immediately turned back to his conversation, his back a solid wall. I was dismissed. Later that evening, desperate and humiliated, I found my aunt by the bar. She's always been the family's emotional center, the softest touch. He hates me, I said, the words catching in my throat. She sighed, a deep, weary sound, and stirred her drink. He doesn't hate you, Jessica. I don't think he has the energy for that. She looked at me with pity, which was somehow worse than anger. I asked him, you know. I asked why he couldn't just let it go, why he couldn't forgive you. She took a sip of her drink, then delivered the final blow. He told me it wasn't about the jokes, Aunt Carol. I could handle being the family screw-up. He said, the thing that hurts is that I always thought she was better than that. In a house obsessed with success, I thought she was the one person who knew I was more than my biggest failure. She was my big sister. Then he just shook his head and said, turns out she was the one who needed it most, to prove I was a loser so she could feel like a winner. That's when I finally understood. He hadn't just been my brother, I had been his ideal. His one safe harbor in the judgmental storm of our family, and I hadn't just mocked his failure. I had taken his admiration for me and used it as a weapon against him to score points with the very people he needed protection from. The wedding reception buzzed around me, a nightmare of happy people. I saw him across the room, surrounded by family glowing. And I was on the outside, a ghost at the feast, trapped in the hell of a party I could never leave, forever looking in.